Shalom, 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 Hebrews. I made a video earlier on YouTube entitled Israel Was Not Destroyed in 70 AD. I gave some pretty strong points, but I wanted to add to that and solidify the whole thing there, make it plain. I pondered on doing a follow-up, a part two to this video, and I decided, because of the importance of the topic and the urgency of all that's going on in the world and what's going on with the nation of Israel, is regathering, I decided to press forward with a follow-up, part two to the video. In part one, I explained how that Gabriel, the archangel, revealed to Daniel in the book of Daniel chapter 8 that a he-goat would arise on the world scene and smite the ram that had the two horns. The he-goat being Greece, the third beast in Daniel chapter 7, verse 6, and the ram being the Medes and Persians in Daniel 7, verse 6. Gabriel revealed to Daniel that the Greeks in the latter end of their kingdom would destroy Israel as a nation. Daniel 8, verses 23 to 25. Antiochus Epiphanes did just that in 43 BC. 143 BC. Antioch stripped the temple of its treasures, stopped the oblations, and caused the abomination that maketh desolate, so that no one of Israel remained in Israel. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 45. Antiochus was the prince that shall come, and shall destroy the city, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary, the temple, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. In Daniel 9, verse 26, and Daniel 8, verse 23 through 25. The Israelites returned from Babylon after 70 years, just as Jeremiah had prophesied in Jeremiah 25, verse 12. The Israelites built Zerubbabel's temple, not Solomon's temple, Zechariah 4, verse 6. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Hebrews, let us get this thing right, because this is of the utmost importance. Antiochus Epiphanes destroyed Zerubbabel's temple and drove out the Israelites, who fled into Africa and settled on the west coast of Africa. All this happened in 143 BC, give or take some years. This did not take place in 70 AD. The Hebrew Israelites were long gone from the land of Israel in 70 AD. It was given to Daniel in a dream by the archangel Gabriel, and he informed and explained to Daniel, and it all came to pass in 143 BC, not in 70 AD. We see in Daniel 9, verse 27, that Antiochus Epiphanes would confirm a covenant with many Israelites, lawless Israelites, for 1 week, 7 years. And in the midst of the week, he, Antiochus, should cause the sacrifices and the oblations to cease. And for the overspreading of the abomination, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Hebrews, this event came to pass in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 11 through 28, when lawless Hebrews arose out of Israel and said, let us go and make a treaty, a covenant, for 7 years with the heathens around us. For ever since the time we became separated from them, many misfortunes have overtaken us. Therefore they went to the King Antiochus, and he authorized them to introduce the practices of the heathen and submitted to uncircumcision and disowned the holy agreement. After establishing the covenant with the Israelites, Antiochus conceived an idea of being king of Egypt also. So he entered Egypt with a strong force and made war on Ptolemy, the king of Egypt. And Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many fell wounded, and Antiochus captured the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt for 3.5 years, in the 143rd year, Antiochus, in the midst of the week of 7 years, turned back and came up against Israel and entered Jerusalem with a strong force. Antiochus in his arrogance went into the sanctuary, took the gold altar and the lampstand, the bowls, the gold censers, the curtains, the crowns, the gold ornamentation on the front of the temple, and he stripped it all off. He massacred Israelites and spoke with great arrogance. The very earth was shaken over its inhabitants, and the whole household of Jacob was covered with shame. Hebrews, it was told to Daniel by Gabriel that Antiochus would be powerful, and he would destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the Israelites, the holy people. Antiochus, through his policies, also would cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he would magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand, just as Alexander the Greek was broken without hand. My fellow Israelites, this all came to pass in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 41 through 53. It reads as follows. The king Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that they should become one people, and everyone should give up his particular practices. And many from Israel agreed to his kind of worship and offered sacrifices to idols and broke the Sabbath. Jerusalem and the towns of Judah followed practices of foreign that was foreign to their country, and put a stop to whole burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings at the sanctuary, the temple. Antiochus caused the Israelites to break the Sabbath and to profane the feast and pollute the temple. He caused Israel to build altars and sacred precincts and idol temples, and sacrifice hogs and unclean cattle, and to leave their sons uncircumcised, and defile themselves with every unclean and profane practice. Many of the Israelites and everyone who was ready to forsake the law joined with them, and they did wrong in the land, and forced Israel to hide in every hiding place they had. Hebrews, my fellow Hebrews, Gabriel tells Daniel in Daniel 12, verse 9 and 10, to go his way, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. This too, Hebrews, came to a pass in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 59 to 64, which states, on the 25th of the month, they offered sacrifices upon the altar, which was set up on the altar of burnt offerings. The women who had circumcised their children, they put to death under this decree, hanging the babies around their necks and destroying their families, and the men who had circumcised them. Yet many in Israel stood firm and resolved in their hearts not to eat what was unclean. They preferred death to being polluted with the food or profaning the sacred agreement. And so they died, and Israel suffered intensely. With all that being said, and understanding that Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greeks destroyed Israel as a nation, Israel came to an end at the time appointed. In closing, my fellow Hebrew Israelites, I must remind you that the Lord said that he would break the king of fierce countenance, Antiochus Epiphanes, without hand after he destroyed Israel. This is in Daniel 8, verse 25. And my fellow Hebrew Israelites, the Lord of hosts did just as he had said in 2 Maccabees 9, verses 5, verses 7, verses 9 through 12, and verses 28. The all-seeing Lord, the God of Israel, struck Antiochus down with an incurable but unseen blow, for he had hardly uttered of the words when he was seized with an incredible pain in his bowels and sharp eternal pains. But it happened that he fell off his chariot as it was rushing along, and he was racked in every part of his body from the fall, making the power of God manifest to all men, so that worms swarmed from the impious creature's body, and while he was still alive in anguish and pain, his flesh fell off, and because of the stench, the whole army turned from corruption in disgust. The man who shortly before thought he could touch the stars of heaven, no one could bear to carry because of his intolerable stench. So it was then that, broken in spirit, he he began, for the most part, to give up his arrogance, and under the scourge of the guard to obtain some knowledge, for he was tortured with pain in every instant. So the murderer and blasphemer, after the most intense suffering, such as he had inflicted on other people, ended his life most pitifully among the mountains in a foreign land. Such was the end of Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes. My Hebrew Israelites, I hope that this video informed and shed a light on when Israel was destroyed. And I hope to visit you in the future with more videos. Shalom, shalom, shalom.